Why are all cars similar and ugly nowadays? Why is everyone driving a big SUV or crossover? Back in the days, you'd see Range Rovers in only a few settings. So if you were a landowner who had occasionally to drive through his estate, right, to go and rescue a sheep maybe, or you had a Range Rover, but that was a working car, right? It was always covered in mud. Or you had a couple of tarmac queens, right? If you were a drug dealer, if you were a wannabe gangster or a Chelsea wag, you'd buy a tarmac queen, you'd buy a Chelsea tractor, you'd buy a Range Rover. It was basically a status symbol or a desperate call for attention. Please look at me, right? And that was it. But then Nissan came with the Qashqai and then the Duke. And it just opened the floodgate of horrid cars flooding the market. And I don't see why people go for them. 15 years ago, if you'd ask an SUV owner why he or she was driving it, they'd probably tell you, you're sitting so much higher in the traffic, it's so much safer. You see over the car in front of you, and we feel much safer, much better visibility all around. But now everyone's driving an SUV, so that advantage is gone. What are you going to do? What are you going to buy next? A double-decker bus? And it's also the sheer lack of everything inside that boggles the mind. It's the new poverty spec. Every new car comes with a new poverty spec. If you're old as heck, like I am, we were used to poverty spec cars back in the days, right? So you'd scrabble some money for months, you'd save up, and then you'd go to the dealership and you'd buy a car and you'd buy the best trim, the best level car. And that was a poverty spec car. They had put a clock where the ref counter was supposed to be, and you had a lot of buttons that were blocked off, like there was nothing written on them, and you couldn't actuate them. And that was to remind you what a poor peasant you were, because if you had just a little bit more money, you would have had enough money to purchase a car of a higher trim, and you'd have a proper ref counter and buttons that work and do something, right? And that was the poverty spec. But I feel now, even for cars that cost 50, 60, 70 grand, you get poverty spec automatically. What do you get? You get 2 seats, not even real leather, like fake, cheap leather, a steering wheel, an Android tablet where the gauge cluster should be, and an iPad in the middle of the dashboard. And that's it. That's all you get. For 50, 60, 70 grand. Maybe they've put a couple of LEDs, in the footwell for some atmosphere, right, ambiance. Something you could have purchased for a £5 at Halford 10 years ago and plug it onto the cigarette lighter, right? And it just boggles the mind. And manufacturers don't do it because it's better for you. They do it because it's cheaper for them, right? One iPad, one wiring loom to the nearest CAN bus or DCU. Done and dusted. Every single button should have its own actuator, its own wire. Manufacturers do it to save up on cost. And they don't pass those savings on to you. They charge you more for the privilege of having a cheaper car. It's empty. Oh, it's minimalistic. No, it's fucking empty, right? It reminds me of those arcade games. You'd put a 50 pence or a quid in, like 20 years ago, and you drive like Sega Rally or something. It's that empty. It's crazy. And then you have the sheer size of them. Like, if you have a brand new car, a brand new SUV, and you live in a house that was built in the 70s or 80s, you and me know your garage is an extra room for storage in your house. Your car doesn't fit in it, right? You have a freezer and a fridge in your garage and some boxes. It's the new attic, and your car is outside rotting in the rain because it just doesn't fit in it. Have you ever been in a hospital car park or a supermarket car park that's over 20 years old? Every car in there just pokes out of the parking space. The parking spaces are no longer big enough to contain cars. People have to maneuver like mad, like a 50-point turn just to be able to fit in one of those spaces, and then they have to crawl out of the sunroof because there's no way you can open your doors. Nobody needs cars that big. Like, if you have to haul things, you buy a van or a trailer or a pickup if you feel American, right? Or an estate. If you want to carry a lot of people around, you buy a people's carrier or a minibus. Nobody needs an SUV. 99% of SUVs out there will never see a speck of gravel in their life. I don't see the appeal. And on top of, they all look the same on top of that. On the outside and on the inside, they all have the same outline, all have the same shape, all have the same empty interior with the iPad. Like, there's no point for a badge anymore. Just pick one. They all look the same anyway. Pick one randomly. On a serious note, though, give me a 90s or early 2000 car any day of the week. And the funny thing is, because all cars nowadays are so bland, so similar, cars that were deemed ugly in the 90s and early 2000s now start looking interesting.